Hello, everyone. It's Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to talk with Jonathan Goetsch of US ProTech, who's the CEO. He's a cybersecurity veteran with many, many years of experience in the area, and he specializes in what's known as continuous diagnostics mitigation. So, Jonathan, welcome.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Okay, so to set the stage for everybody, could you please give us a brief description about US ProTech, what your company does, who are your customers, and what are the products and services that you provide?
Well, thank you, Henry, for inviting me for a talk today. US ProTech is a company that was founded in 1999. It later would incorporate in Las Vegas in the mid-2000s, and it's been in cybersecurity space since really 2001. And from that time, we became a managed security service provider. In about 2007, we adopted NIST as the framework for cybersecurity methodology within the company and started developing software applications to accommodate that. If you're familiar with NIST, there's NIST 800 and NIST 853. It would be a designation for products that the federal government use and divides it up into categories of secrecy. So there's low, moderate, and high. During that time, we decided to branch out into penetration testing and vulnerability software development. And we've become a software development company over the years and have created a number of different companies from that. So US ProTech is a holding company, it's a managed service company, and it's a software development company.
Okay, so for the people who don't understand CDM, what is continuous diagnostics and mitigation?
Well, it's so funny because a lot of people ask me that same question, Henry. They say, CDM, what is it? Or I think I may have heard about it. And it's actually a program that's over 6 years old that was developed by the Department of Homeland Security. And what they wanted to do is they endeavored to create a multi-step process where they could identify devices that were on the network. It could capture means of who's on the network and what's at risk on the network, and ultimately correct things that would be on the network. And they wanted all of this information on, of course, one dashboard. So after 4 years, they got through phase one, and we're officially actually in phase two of the CDM program objective. But today, technology's caught up to what some of the government requirements and expectations are, and we are participating in that particular process. So CDM endeavors to identify true risk, and then validate that risk, and then push it to a dashboard. Now, the Department of Homeland Security's dashboard is called Einstein. So a lot of applications are written with APIs to deliver that information to Einstein. And they want that done in 72 hours. Now, we all know that the speed of government is not the speed of business, the commercial business market specifically. And a product that we created actually does much of this, but it does it in less than 2 minutes. Quite fast. So continuous meaning it needs to always be on. It's not something that we start and stop. Diagnostics means that we need to be able to see into the problem at a very detailed level. So it might be that software is vulnerable, but if we look at software will have a multitude of other packages that make up the software. We need to be able to look into each one of these packages and then against, let's say, for example, the National Vulnerability Database, assess what the level of criticality of that vulnerability is. And then mitigation. It's to be able to mitigate that problem. Now imagine we're still in the same application. We now endeavor to update that software. And without having to scan ever again, you literally have an immediate update of, let's say you had 20 problems, now you have 19. So this would be a continuous diagnostics mitigation capability, but it's not exclusive to just hardware and software. The objective is to also know about users and user behavior. It's about people and what activity they're doing as authorized users. And it's also about being able to identify an adversary. So we talked before, Henry, about dwell time.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we could kind of explore a little bit in the conversation today. But CDM doesn't endeavor just to find the problem. We want to see it, understand it, drill into it, and remediate it, and have that all in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up dwell time, because I was going to follow on with that. So if you can explain what dwell time is.
Well, dwell time specifically is the amount of time that an adversary is inside a network undetected. Mm-hmm. Now, that means it could be an authorized person as well. I mean, we assume that dwell time of an adversary is a bad guy who's inside. Mm-hmm. So let's just start with dwell time today. Over the last few years, dwell time has been increasing. The amount of time that somebody's been inside the network until they've been identified. For example, last year, the average is around 200 days. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, 2019, the average is closer to 300 days. Mm-hmm. And in the past, we've seen articles just recently in the last few months and within the year for sure, where dwell time has been exposed to be over 4 years in length of an adversary inside of a network. Mm-hmm. Now, conversely, that's a bad person, but it doesn't mean they're not an authorized person. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to identify both the activity of an authorized user and an unauthorized user. And these are the things that we've been focused on building software applications for years.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I know. I get all these alerts like from LifeLock, or your information has been compromised. It's now available on the dark web. Change your passwords. Nothing. Okay, when did that happen? So how do I know what's going on? They don't give you enough information on that.
No, and there's a place for that type of software, and there's a place for that type of notification. Obviously, there are legal issues about notification, which I think we're coming to see companies realizing they need to not withhold information. We've seen companies like Microsoft and Cisco and other large businesses get a firm slap on the hand for knowing of the vulnerability and then not disclosing it, and then trying to, let's say, come up with a plan to resolve that problem, but in that, months have passed. That means for months, private businesses and maybe even agencies have been exposed to those types of vulnerabilities. So the issue is notification. I'm glad you're getting notified, by the way, if LifeLock tells you, you've been compromised. But there's places to go, like Pwned, where you can find out if your email's been effectively compromised. And one of the things that I would encourage your viewers to do is go to pwn.com and find out if their email's been compromised, so that you would know whether or not you should implement multi-factor authentication. There's a single file on the dark web right now that has over 1.4 billion credentials in clear text that's available for sale, and it's not even expensive. So the username and the password, this is something that is not as useful anymore without that third multi-factor authentication piece. So I encourage all of your viewers to go check and make sure to start using multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, I find that as a pain in the neck, that multi-factor, but it's like, you got to get out your cell phone, enter a code, then put it on every time.
Yeah, it might seem difficult, and there are processes for making that faster, but I would rather take the third step and know that I'm using credentials that are mine, right, and when I'm not in the system, somebody's not using my credentials when I'm not present. Yeah. In most of our aerospace, we obviously service the aerospace and defense industry, as well as other like petrochemical, healthcare, retail, and others. But in the aerospace and defense industry, multi-factor authentication is not an option. If you want a government contract and it happens to deal with military components or even aircraft, you want that type of information to be controlled. Yeah. So that's one of the levels of NIST, which is controlled unclassified. It's an area that we specialize in servicing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know in the defense industry and aerospace, they've had that for years too. They would give you like a little card that would give you a code that every time you sign on and you use that.
That's correct.
It refreshes every, several seconds.
That's correct.
All right. So, when you start talking to people about cybersecurity and all of these vulnerabilities, what's the biggest one or two of the biggest misconceptions out there about cybersecurity?
Misconceptions. Oh, there are plenty. Some of the misconceptions about cybersecurity is that there might be some sort of a silver bullet where, I don't know, if you buy something, you're going to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than looking at one product, or even a couple of products to solve your problem, a layered approach to cybersecurity is far more superior than to be selective and to say, well, we're good because we have a good firewall and we do, we block spam. This is probably not a very intelligent way to approach cybersecurity. And I think that a lot of people think that there's a product that they're going to buy that's going to be the silver bullet again. Mm-hmm. Look at cybersecurity more like a brick wall, mm-hmm. each brick containing one functional component of cybersecurity. And just like walls are layered, up, your cybersecurity should be layered down. So there are, in the OS model, of course, there are 7 layers that are often looked at. And today, predominant layer 3 is where we find a lot of effort made, which is where all of the hardware, like the firewalls and the switches, all the servers and the routers, and everything that lives in the networking world is targeted, because that's where all the software is. All the software is running, these analytics, and there's lots of people poking around looking for ways to compromise the software. But that's just one of 7 layers. If we're not looking at the users and the groups and the behavioral analytics, and we're not collecting forensics, and all the way down to, you've seen this in the healthcare industry where we have privacy screens, we see there are certain companies that are already taking steps to layer their security. And I advise all of your viewers to really take a layered approach. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. So what do you do in the situation where there's companies now that are trying to eliminate data centers and push everything out into the cloud? Mm-hmm. To me, that kind of is more vulnerable than having it in-house. What is your thought?
Great. It's another great question, and one that I've actually shifted on over time. When I think in the 2000s, with my enterprise customers, if I mentioned cloud, there was a grimace on their face, and maybe a gesture that the door was not very far behind. Mm-hmm. And I concurred. I believe that the data center was, in fact, the sole solution for the enterprise. Mm-hmm. The cloud came into play, and I was reluctant to adopt cloud practices because of the idea of being held captive. There have been several instances where corporations' data has been literally become a hostage component in a situation because a simple user may have done something inappropriate on the network in the cloud, and therefore the cloud provider locked the entire company data up and made it unavailable to the company. These are some very scary stories. But the advent of FedRAMP and accessibility in certain cloud platforms have now brought a level of resilience into the system, and we don't hear stories now of companies being locked away from their data. So we've seen over the last 10 years now go from data center, pure data center, to a slow migration to adopt some cloud. I have some customers that are 25% cloud, others at 50% cloud. And I have to say that there are others that are nearing 75 and 100%.
So even like with the defense companies, they're going to, because at one point they were very reluctant to have anything out in the cloud.
And so there are FedRAMP approved cloud service providers. I'm not going to get into mentioning services, but I will tell you that if they meet the FedRAMP component, then that is sufficient for that controlled unclassified information that's out there. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is cloud security has improved immensely. What was once something that you would buy a service and you buy in cloud, you not being able to load applications for cybersecurity capabilities, that whole thing has switched now to the point where that service is let's call it a server, and on that server I can load my cybersecurity analytics and capabilities into the system. So cloud can provide redundancy and resiliency as well as cybersecurity today, far better than it ever has. While some companies are still reluctant, our company has embraced it, and we are not afraid to use cloud any longer.
Okay. All right. Great. So how do you? So you're not afraid to use the cloud. How do you convince other people to get over those fears?
Well, I only do it two ways. One, if they're not interested, there's no convincing. You can't push a cow over, right? Not too easily. I've heard of cow tipping, but I've never seen it. They have to want to embrace new technologies for the purposes of business process improvement. Business process improvement can be a compelling reason. And if you can demonstrate cybersecurity capabilities and application stability, right, then there's a reason to demonstrate the benefit of the cloud. Now, you and I both have used applications, and we use them today. It could even happen right now. We could get jitter, right, on our screen share. So not every technology is perfect in the cloud. If we're talking about availability, and it might be either a regional or a national or even a global operation, they need to have multiple points of access and multiple points of redundancy. And the closer I can get the end user to a data center, right, where the geographic distance is shortened, we're taking hops out and milliseconds out of the delay time. So cloud can be embraced for a lot of reasons. I personally just say, let's rent a server up in the cloud. Let's apply the security applications that we're going to use as the protocols we want to capture the analytics that we're desiring, and then let's test it. Because there's nothing like a proof of concept.
Right.
And I think that's what I would encourage your viewers to do, is be willing to open up a proof of concept in a cloud environment where you can apply those applications that you use and then test them rigorously.
Yeah, that's very good advice. So basically you try it, try an experiment, form a hypothesis, collect data, and determine did it work or not, did it meet your needs.
Exactly. So.
Okay, great. So let's talk about your backstory. What defining moment occurred in your life that led you to get into cybersecurity?
Well, now that's a loaded question, Henry. It's a little unfair because I lost a multi-million-dollar piece of business. Wow. No kidding. So my introduction to technology was through connectivity, and I was a successful reseller of internet connectivity back in the 1990s. And there was a large television station in Los Angeles that wanted to consider co-branding with us to deliver internet connectivity as a means of two things. One, providing a direct connection with its viewership, and B, be in the revenue stream of what dial-up at the time was generating. And we had a great business plan that was built around that. But we were planning to use proxy servers to do our filtering. And when one of the executives who felt that was going to be sufficient left, the company was left with a question mark: how will this impact our computer network security? And while proxy servers were sufficient back in the 1990s, they would be considered insufficient by today's standards. So that piece of business that we lost really spelled out for us that in the future, there's going to be a question that's going to come up a lot that we're going to need to deal with. And that's, what do we look like from an outsider's perspective? And how can I monitor my computer security posture? And we endeavored to start a company to answer those. And that's what I meant. Between 1999 and 2001, we built the solutions that brought those answers to the table. And I have to admit, the companies that trusted us in 2001, they're still customers of ours today.
Okay, very good. So can you share a story how you help a specific customer to overcome their fears of cybersecurity and implement your products?
Absolutely. So there were two levels of fear, actually. One was the fear of, I heard you have a new product, right? And well, how do you get over the fear of a new product? Again, I'm going to suggest a proof of concept. But then the other fear, which was actually a greater fear, which was the fear that ultimately led them to do the proof of concept, was that they still couldn't answer the question, what is my security posture from an outsider's perspective? And frankly, what is my security posture from an insider's perspective? And Jonathan, can you show that to me in the same application? And when I said yes, and I can demonstrate it, they said, we should talk. Mm-hmm. So I think the challenge was, can we demonstrate the ability to bring real-time analytics in a meaningful way? But in a meaningful mean everybody wants different kinds of information. Mm-hmm. So what you and I might want, which would be, what's the likelihood? I mean, is it on a scale of 1 to 10, for example, or what's the percentage of systems that are vulnerable? Or numerically, can I understand the difference between what's critical and what's just, maybe medium or so on and so forth? That type of information is essential for the C-suite so that they can quickly have a different conversation with their IT department. Imagine if I have to ask, hey, so what's our, how many vulnerabilities do we have today? That's one way to find out that information. But if you already have that information at your fingertips, you could say, Henry, I noticed that we had 15 new critical vulnerabilities today. Can you give me some insight into what those are? It's a different kind of conversation. Sure. It's a conversation that allows the C-suite not to be kept away from information that's essential for them to run their business. And more importantly, it empowers the conversation with their direct reports to inform them that they have an understanding, that they know there's some changes, and that it's the changes that they're interested in learning about. So it gives the director then not just this ambiguity of, well, go find out what our security posture is, but it's what were those 15 changes, because that's what the request was. Mm-hmm. So looking at a customer or a prospect and getting over the challenges of what are the fears? The fears are, tell me about this new product, and should I be afraid of not knowing what the information is? We've successfully blended those two in a solution which we call Anamo. And that's the continuous diagnostics and mitigation application.
Wonderful. So if you were to take that story now and distill it down to a single sentence, what would be the moral of that story?
The moral of the story is you're better to know what your security posture is and be able to articulate that with your staff in a way that demonstrates a level of knowledge, right? Than to come to the department asking for information from a position of a lack of knowledge. Mm. So we always think in terms of cyber kung fu, right? It's knowledge over power, right? The power is in the systems and the tools, but having knowledge and being able to use that, this is the moral, the idea of taking, what should I take away from this is the idea that you could have knowledge, right? And use that knowledge in whatever way is essentially necessary to improve the company. I believe that knowledge is power. And in this case, if you don't have to ask what your posture is, and you can talk about in a position of knowing your posture and therefore these new findings, this is a different dialogue than what the C-suite is currently having today with the majority of businesses we interface with.
Okay, wonderful. I can understand that. You say, okay, we got 50 new vulnerabilities today. Let's talk about those. What are we going to do so they're not there tomorrow?
Right. That's exactly correct.
All right. So let me ask you now, when you're thinking about over your life, what can you share an experience you had early on that still influences how you approach business today?
How do I approach business? Well, I had the fortunate luxury of being trained by a very large Fortune 100 business who taught me what the concept of total customer ownership is. And it was an idea back in the 80s, right? It was an idea then. And it's something that I've never let go of. And what it means to me today is not just, have a product or have a service and make a sale and, move on to the next client, but stick around, understand and listen. If the better you understand the challenges of your customers, the better likelihood you're going to be able to service them and win their confidence over a long period of time. We have customers that have been with us decades. And I was just visiting with one of them yesterday, and here I am for one particular purpose meeting with the company, and in walks an operational executive who then plucks me out of that meeting to inform me that there's another piece of business that we need to work with him on that's outside of what that meeting was. So how did that come to pass? Well, the trust was built. The availability of being in the building is there. These things can't be manufactured. They can only be done. You have to be present, and we as a company want to be present for our customer and let them know that we have an open ear to their needs. For example, we built a product that's called a governance, risk, and compliance application. And we didn't do it because we thought it was, going to solve all of our problems, but we built it initially to solve our problems, a place to store our information for regulatory compliance. And it turns out that some attorneys got involved and said, it'd be really helpful if we could distribute and monitor and track our employees when they read and agree to the terms of the changes in the policies. And then the departments can actually departmentally change their procedures, kind of a little bit more, I'm going to say, ad hoc. But there's three things that are happening. There's the policy, there's the procedure, and below that there are the processes, like the appendixes. So we said, well, let's incorporate that into the application. And through time, we've built the solutions for teams and tasks and groups and project management and so on and so forth. There's also the assessment pieces that we build into these applications. So no matter what the regulatory compliance requirement you're looking to solve, we've already integrated into the governance, risk, and compliance application based upon that NIST framework and others. So by listening to the customer, hearing what their needs are, building these modules into the applications, we're bringing a better solution to our customers, literally with new revs generally twice a year. So imagine a module, an application like you have like Windows, it's got it's got the 6 or 7 things we use all the time. But if they brought out something really new, like when they brought, some screen sharing company, right? It was sort of like, well, now we can do video, right? And so video was embraced. Of course, storage increases as well, right? So there's a lot of things that happen that make impacts on others. But I would suggest that listening to the customers has probably been one of the most unique things that we do on a regular basis to help drive our product development.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So you mentioned before that there are thousands of cybersecurity companies out there. So how was it that ProTech got invited to the White House and then back for a private meeting?
Well, that's an interesting story. I was actually sitting right here in my office, and I got a phone call, and they simply said, "Look, we've heard some good things about what you're doing in this area of continuous diagnostics and mitigation software application development." And I was like, "Wow, okay, thank you very much." And the invitation was to come out and join what ultimately would be a private briefing held in the Eisenhower Room. And there they gathered about 45 software development companies, and we discussed a number of different cyber issues, everything from personal privacy all the way to government security. Now, there was no secret information shared. It was really, it wasn't so much a dog and pony show as it was a fact-finding mission. So the idea that I got invited to such a small group of software development companies in cybersecurity was truly an honor. And traveling back, I got a chance to meet with a number of secretaries of the government, as well as undersecretaries. We've had continuing dialogue with some of the deputy chiefs of cybersecurity in various departments. And subsequent to that, there was this curiosity about, well, we'd like to learn more about this application. So I have had the opportunity to visit the White House on more than one occasion. And recently, as a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, we came back from a meeting at the Pentagon. So the application that we've developed has not only been met with a high level of interest from agencies and government departments, but we're really focused on solving the ability to bring continuous diagnostics and mitigation to the private sector. I mean, the commercial market is literally where we have 90% of our focus. And what I would tell the commercial industry is that this CDM, this DHS thing, this thing that they're doing in the government, while it's an objective of theirs, it should be an objective of yours. We should all be looking at, how do I get the most accurate information about our security posture from a multitude of layers, that being layer 3, layer 4, layer 5 of the OS, so that I can understand what our forensic capability is, the user behavior, our software analytics, and have that updating on a real dashboard in real time. This is not something that is a government-only product. This is for corporations today. And where companies like, well, the largest companies that we know, I mean, I really don't want to trash any companies' names, but we know who have been hacked. And these companies are large. They are the largest in the world. And to have an IT budget and the skill set that they have, and to still be compromised, should be a very clear warning that it's not an if, it's definitely a when, and the likelihood is they may already be in. So you're going to need to know, as somebody running a business, how do I find out if there's an adversary inside my environment? It's very difficult for tools to be installed after they have already accessed your system to identify them. This is one of the cruxes of the matter, which is why Anamo has been so successful, because our product actually, it's independent of when the adversary has arrived inside. I can identify and we can remove that individual with, let's say, a very rapid response. Okay. You know, so CDM is not just for government. CDM is for the private industry.
Sure. Okay, so before we started, you spoke about different types of successes. So let me just ask you, what does success look like for Jonathan Goetsch? Let's put it that way.
Success for me. Well, success for me, I get to see it in, I get to see it in the faces of the people that work in the company. I've seen some of them go from, renting to buying, and from being single to becoming married, or, moving on in life and being successful in life. I can measure my success by the success of other people. As a business, we want to succeed. And as a business succeeds, it needs to incorporate the success of all the partners. That could be from the board of advisors and the board of directors. It could be for stakeholders that have equity. It could be for, of course, the lives of the employees. But another measurement is, are we stagnant? And I do not believe in stagnation. That's why our products, we continually push the improvements of the products, because as long as the product development, we're embracing the customer's needs and we're delivering new solutions, the relevance of our product stays high. And if it stays high with our customers, then that's a success in itself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would measure our success based upon our ability to rapidly respond to the needs of our customers.
Okay, so what are your top 3 process or capability challenges or concerns today?
Okay, Henry, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to go ahead and start all over and rephrase that entire question.
Sure, yeah, I'll tell you to freeze up too. So for you as the CEO, what are your top 3 concerns about process or capability challenges?
Top 3 concerns are process and capability. Well, every company, our company is focused on some risks, right? We have risks. So cybersecurity is paramount to us. So we not only, build product, but we use the product. Because we use the product, we know it, of course, intimately. This allows us to mitigate certain risks for not only ourselves, but our customers. They might find themselves in a situation, be using the application, and need some assistance. So we have to have our service delivery department is the crux of being able to deliver the right information or the right service or the right technical support at the right time. If this is not a challenge to any other company, my hat's off to them. But we have a real focus on customer success. And so this is something that, as a company scales, It's all right. Welcome back. As the company scales, this is a paramount concern for me as an executive. Another area of concern has to be product development and what we're doing with our engineering team. And we've embraced the agility approach, using Agile to have our meetings and quickly develop changes and stay on task. But I'm not sure that we've really been able to embrace it as well as we could have, or other companies may have. And so product development is paramount, because I believe that you can live and die by an application that fails, right? So stability in the delivery of the product has to be there, which is why we've spent a lot of time in the area of not only research and development, but in testing. I want our people to break it before anybody else can break it. And so we have a substantial R&D effort, and we have broken applications before we take them out to the general public. Yeah. So that's the second one. The third one is going to be finance. Now, finance can be, of course, a derivative of investment. It can also be a derivative of sales. So we have to manage that, and one should not be overwhelmingly lopsided. I think if some companies focus purely on raising capital, they lose sight on what the importance is of the revenue that the customer base is representative of. And likewise, if you're just going to organically grow and you're not going to look for alternative funding, then your growth spurt or your speed to market can be impacted. So as an executive, my job is to balance that. And I've surrounded myself with a team of advisors, as well as my own 25 years of business experience and my internal team to advise me. And I think between that, we can tackle those three particular objectives, I think, quite well. Thank you for asking.
Sure. Okay, so just a couple other questions about your customers. So what's the most important question customers should be asking when they consider trying to purchase or use cybersecurity protection?
The most important question. Okay, well, I would always, I would default to, how will this impact my business, right? Because you could say my cybersecurity product is the best thing since sliced bread. The question is, how does it impact the business? Let me give you an example. There are technologies that are available that are significant, and the level of effort to deploy them are equally significant. A typical ERP solution rollout is no less than a year, right? Could be even longer. And I think the significance of the impact of that is something that companies don't readily acknowledge, because it's not just a bunch of outside consultants that are going to install it and roll it out. The level of inside effort and human resources that will be required to roll that out successfully is staggering and significant. And I've never seen anything really roll out on time. But what if one of your benefits was that you could eliminate the technical problem of rolling out the application? What if the application could roll out automatically? In fact, it required no, let's call it, configuration. That's pretty practical. Now, that's one thing that of course, we've endeavored to solve. The other thing is time. Time, how long does it take to deploy this? I mean, how do I deploy it across the network? How do I make it happen smoothly? We've written an application that's so small, Henry, it deploys in 10 seconds. I can use it on a particular device, or using MSIs, we can do a whole network, and in a very short period of time, without any effort or any professional service, right? In just moments, network-wide, have it installed. Now, hold on. So now it not only works out of the box, it knows what to do, right? It requires no effort on the part of the end user to configure, and within minutes, it's already reporting. Doesn't take years to get technology to work. So I think that people that are looking at technology and some of the problems that they are going to face should include questions about, how will this impact my company? will I be required to dedicate staff? How much time? How much effort? Let the vendor spell that out. Because if you're not getting this information in advance, then you're getting yourself into a whole world of taking a department and putting them in a different direction for some unknown period of time.
Right, and even that, this could be that it interferes with your workflow. So now you deployed this, now you got to change the way you do business so you can use the tool that you just spent all this money on too.
Right, right. And if I might, I just want to take a moment here and talk about some key differentiators, right, between some of the applications that we've created and why they are things that your viewers might want to hear about and might want to consider when evaluating a cybersecurity product. Okay. For example, one of the interesting things we talked about is that it just deploys automatically, it works automatically, it takes no configuration. And of course, it populates the dashboard. More importantly, okay, when you are looking at the application, the problem that technologists, I should say, have is that they fix something and they have to wait to learn if it's been done correctly. We've eliminated this. With a 1-to-1 ratio, we can literally update a particular, let's call it a software vulnerability for the sake of conversation. Normally, we would have to go and scan an entire another system and get another, 100-page or 500-page report to validate that that's been done. In our environment, 1-to-1 ratio. You update the software, and within that refresh rate of about 2 minutes, that number actually indicates it was 20, and now it's 17. This is a more immediate gratification of the work. If you're going to look at a product and you want to buy a product, let a vendor demonstrate their ability to show the productivity of the employee to the employer. We endeavor to do this. Likewise, build in reports that allow productivity to be something monitored and managed by a manager. So if a manager is curious of these 5 employees, who's doing what more efficiently, the software should be able to demonstrate the efficiencies of that line staff. We might find that while one person is more effective and efficient at resolving cybersecurity vulnerabilities in software, there's another one who's far more efficient at identifying inappropriate user behavior inside the network. Let us have tools that can demonstrate the benefits. And now if I can just go back to software for a moment, I could say that Jim and Tom are tasked with the same exact function, but one of them numerically can rectify software remediation more rapidly at a scale of 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1. Wouldn't we want to know that? We might want to take one of those employees who is underperforming and either train them on the software so that they can be more efficient, or repurpose that individual, or even release them back into industry. These are the things that should be built into tools that are logical, that I think your viewers would benefit from asking. Like, show me how management can use this, right, to their benefit. Yeah. And so while we have the sysadmin or the technologist worker and the manager, the executive also needs to have that ability. The ability of very rapidly understanding what their situation is. And situational awareness is taught in every battlefield, right? And cyber is no different in terms of its being a battlefield. Sure. So cyber awareness or situational awareness can be as simple as a single screen that you look each day at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that it only takes 3 seconds or 4 seconds to understand numerically where we stand, and now you're off to your regular set of duties. So the products that you buy and the products that you implement should be designed to accommodate the C-suite, middle management for all the right reasons, and effectively enhance the user's experience at the end who's doing the work. I think that we've endeavored to do that in our application development. That's just one answer for that question.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much. We could just keep going on and on, but I want to respect your time here. We're rapidly running out of it. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more?
Well, Henry, it's been a really good conversation today. There's a lot more that I'd love to tell you about, and maybe we can do a follow-up call in the future. But when people are interested in reaching out and talking with me directly, US ProTech can be found online at usprotech.com. USProtech.com. That's USPROTECH.com. Products that we represent are governance, risk, and compliance applications and continuous diagnostics and mitigation applications. If anyone's curious to take a look at Anamo, it can be found at anamo.io, and that's spelled ANAMO.io. And the office number, they're always free to call. It's area code 949-629-3900. Just ask for Jonathan Goetsch, and I'm sure that the call will get transferred directly to me. And those are ways to get in touch with me. And finally, email. I could just give my email. It's Jonathan@USProTech.com. And Jonathan is spelled the traditional way, JONATHAN@USProTech.com. Thanks again, Henry. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. You're a fantastic storyteller. Just fascinating learning all about the different aspects of cybersecurity. So I'm sure that everybody else who's going to view this will find it just as fascinating. So thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thank you all. We'll see you soon.